So the talk today is about grasping with a sense of touch. And it's basically sort of merging two of the main areas where we have been working, that is tactile sensing and grasping and hands. So it's a collection of results, recent results that we have had with a group that is made of a few colleagues, Matteo Bianchi, Manuel Catalano, Giorgio Grillo, and Manolo Garabini, some postdocs, namely Franco Angelini, Giuseppe Averta, also Cosimo della Santina, Simone Fani, and Chiara Gabellieri and Simone Ciotti, and a few students. Basically, the idea is to talk about problems that arise in robotic grasping and manipulation with soft, adaptable hands and new approaches that can be used with tactile sensing capabilities. We take inspiration from humans, as most of the people that are in this workshop, and I will talk a little bit about the role of prosthetics also in learning what to do in robotics. Many cases, grasp is first visually guided and then haptically refined. So we will show a little bit of this process. And then we will see how reactive grasping procedures progressively can refine an initial approximated grasp into a full form closure. So that is roughly the overall way that I planned. Let me start from prosthetics and say how we can imagine to bring tactile sensation back to humans. There are two main approaches, as probably everybody knows. One is invasive, to go and talk directly to the nerve by stimulating them inside the nerve fibers, or by substituting the sensory information somewhere else where you have still sensitivity, which is non-invasive and useful in many cases for the relatively ease of implementation and also the comfort of the patient. Let me say that there is a third way possible, that is to use targeted muscle reinnervation, and in this case targeted skin reinnervation, which means reinnervating with the original nerves that would go to the hand, a part of the skin that is grafted on the stump, and so bringing on the original nerves the information that comes from the prosthesis. And this is a technique that is being pioneered by Oscar Assmann in Vienna and Dario Farina in London, and we are joined in a natural bionics project that will perhaps soon, we hope soon, show some results into that. But coming to the more established non-invasive approaches that we have followed so far, there have been several ways of adding tactile sensations to patients. You see here a number of experiments with patients from Mayo Clinic using a wearable low-frequency force feedback that would give you on the forearm information about the force and tactile information from the content. Another approach is replicating high-fidelity vibrational feedback to convey both surface texture and first contact cues. We can say that also another interesting feature for patients is to know where the hand is, how much is it closed, and this has been attempted through skin stretching. Stretching the skin both tangentially and through rollers in these two examples have been used to give the user a sense of, for instance, the dimension of an object that is being grasped. Of course, when the object is blinded, because otherwise vision will take over. Another interesting experiment in this vein is reported here with the RISE haptic rocker by Marshall Malley and their group, and the same idea of displaying the position. This was extensively tested with prosthesis users. So out of all this research with users, we've come with the idea that tactile sensing is important, but also that some of these devices were a little bit too clumsy for everyday use. And if you focus to use the devices every day on a prosthesis that you can wear in normal life, then we need to go a little bit deeper in finding a suitable technology. Very nice work was done by Antfolk and others on implementing fluidic displays that can take directly the pressure from the fingertips of the prosthesis and bring it to the forearm, to the stump. So we took a little bit the inspiration from them, and we recently devised a wearable integrated soft haptic display, which is called the Wish, and that's been presented at ICRA this year by Federica Barontini and others, which amplifies, modulates, and convey a pressure stimulus that represents the overall force applied by the robotic hand on an object during the grasp phase. So this device is basically made of inflatable chambers that have all the necessary hardware within the socket of a prosthesis, and they are placed here in the position complementary to the position of the electrodes that are used to control the hand. The scheme for controlling the chamber pressure is reported here. I do not have time to go into the details, but here are videos that, sorry, I hope it will show here, maybe a bit choppy, show the inside of the prosthesis socket. Yeah, it's choppy, but it shows. And we can modulate the pressure in different areas to bring information. So we have so far done only one subject and a few tasks. One is a cylinder discrimination and one a virtual eggs task. Cylinder discrimination uses different cylinders of different material, and we ask the patient to distinguish the different materials. So we see that without feedback, we have 75% accuracy, but with tactile feedback, we reach 100% accuracy. More interesting, perhaps, is this virtual egg experiment, where a very fragile object, this is a paper box, very thin paper box, with two mechanical fuses here. You can imagine those as spaghettis that you can press only with some force. If you press more, they will break. We call this virtual eggs. I think we took this from an idea of Christian Cipriani or his group. And the subject did a number of trials, doubling the performance with the feedback for the force. Also, operations were much faster and more confident. So, with limb loss users, we have learned something that we will now see at work in robotics. Tactile feedback is not a top priority for people when the hand can be seen. And this is sort of obvious to everybody who uses a prosthesis. If they can look at the hand, they don't really care too much about tactile feedback, which is always still somehow encumbering and not exactly matching the modality or the location. So it's not that easy to use. But as soon as the hand is not seen, or when you don't want to pay attention to look at your hand, then it is recognized as an important contribution. It's also very good for the embodiment of the hand in a psychological sense, to feel that this is a part of the body. The most desirable features that we have seen in patients are that they would like to have the overall grasping force. Also, the hand closure, the kinesthetic position of the hand, detect the object encounter, the temperature of the object, and the texture. These are roughly prioritized. So grasping force is number 1, and hand closure, the size of the grasped object, is number 2 in most cases. Now, we have been using hands that are soft, and I will not go into that. But here is the processes that we are using with the person. And now we have processes that can adapt to the environment and can be used in operations that are non-obvious with other processes, and that are look like what you would do with your own hand, for instance, to take this book out of the shelf. So the hand is used in connection with the environment. Soft robotics is coming in to play, and the environment is crucial in deciding the shape of your hand. You decide how to use your hand in connection with a model of the environment that you have, and you already know this motion of the medium finger here was not planned by the prosthesis user, but indeed it was not controlled, but it was planned. It was planned that by putting it on top of the book and then pressing down, the finger would deform in this way, and therefore would be able to take the book out. Now, we don't have to look at the finger, but we have to look at the operations that is done here and try to do that in a robotic. What we would like to do now is to move to robotics with what we have learned from prosthetics and do similar things with robots. Thank you. You can see that this is possible. The hardware makes it possible. But on the other hand, this was teleoperated. So there is a person, although far away, that tells the robot what to do and how to use the hand and the environment to do the operation. Now, this thing is important that we learn how to do autonomously. So to do this now in autonomy, we have to think of an architecture. And in this architecture, we believe that there are 3 levels at least. There is a high-level planning, a medium-level implementation, and then an embodied intelligence. And these 3 can contribute. We also see that at the lower level, tactile dominates, while at the higher level, probably is vision that dominates the approach. And of course, in the high level, we have much more predictive control, while in the low level, we have more reactive control. So let's see these 3 components. First, the embodied mechanical intelligence is what we think is realized, for instance, in the soft hand that we have seen already before, that has this ability of translating contact forces with the environment in different shapes of the hand. And that, by the way, has an anthropomorphic functional way of working, which makes it easy for a person to interpret it. But then, then comes the second level, where you have an implementation, where you have tactile sensing that come into play, and you have low-level strategies that implement the approaching phase and the sensor trigger reactions. So you have reactions that depend on how you're grasping the object. Up to the high-level planning level, where you really have to reason or think or maybe imitate how to do a given operation. So at the highest level planning that I will tackle now, you can have different approaches. One is a data-based approach, and one is, of course, a model-based approach. We are agnostic about the approaches, so we are trying a little bit of both. Data-based approach is being considered a very successful approach recently. Here is a paper by Bog, Morales, and other Asfour and Krajic, that thinks data-driven is the way to go. It has some drawbacks, huge databases and extensive experimental sets, which made it somehow the experience that OpenAI had when famously they solved end-to-end the problem of the Rubik cube problem by manipulating the cube was somehow shocking the community. But very recently, you probably know that OpenAI itself has abandoned robotics research. And in the motivations that the founder gave, he said that they thought they could go very far with self-generated data and reinforcement learning. But on the other hand, robotics is hard to find data in robotics, and the company will invest in other areas where there is adequate data for training, and probably come back to robotics when the problem will be solved with the huge dimensionality of the contact problems that we have. So it's not obvious. Therefore, probably learning has to be to circumvent this problem. One possibility is to simulate the grasp and to run the sim-to-real huge simulations for quite some time. This is indeed a possible approach that several groups are following. Or trying to learn still, but including humans and videos of humans that grasp with their own hands. And then from there to extract some knowledge that can be used. So one possible approach is to use a deep neural network by observing many operations. We have tried to do some of this by using the very nice work of Clemens Heppner, Oliver Brock, and others in observing how humans exploit environmental constraints to do manipulation. Then using this classification, we have taken videos and we have classified how different features are grasped and manipulated, reaching an accuracy of 95% in this paper by Giuseppe Averta, Cosimo della Santina, and others. That is okay. It's not great. 95% means 5% error, but still, the bigger problem is when you go from here, from the classification, to execution of motion. We do not have data, but we fear that it will be much less. Another possible approach is here in a paper by Chiara Gabellieri and others, which is, I will go very quickly here, basically based on a bounding box approach, where we look at objects, we take a point cloud, instead of just going in a end-to-end approach, we separate it in boxes. We select a box, and so every object in the world will look like a box. We have only to learn how humans grasp boxes, and if you know how humans grasp different boxes, different sizes in different positions, then you can apply this to the prevailing box in any object, and therefore go and grab objects. So here is a category of objects that we tried with this approach, and here are a few examples of how this approach can work. As you can see, we'll rely on the low level on the adaptability of the hand, which is the low level that I was mentioning before. Here we are using the upper level to manage 21 objects with an 87% of grasps. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that if you want to take that book out of the shelf, or if you want to do any other operation that is in industry, you have to take into account the constraints. And normally there are tight constraints. So you have to not only comply with them, but also in many cases exploit them, as I was mentioning before. So In an experiment like this, when done autonomously, we would like to reason about objects that are almost completely constrained here, have to be taken out of the box and put somewhere else. How can we do this? There are different approaches. Some are using clutters and basically moving objects around to get a grab of the desired one. And some others are more geometric. So here is a recent paper by Lozano Peres and Kelbling that reasons about how to take an object out of a tight constraint. But this is only 2D, and there are no hands, and is not experimental. So in the work by George Paul-Ail that I'm showing here, the idea is to find a path for the object that is possible with the model constraints, find the free motion cone. In this case, the object can go up or can go right or can turn around, and find also which of these possible motions, here are the 4 possible motions that form a geometric cone, and we can study this, which one of those are compatible for a grasp, can be grasped by the given hand and the given allowable surface parts. By doing this, then you can use an idea of random tree construction that can take you eventually to solve problems such as these that you see in this simulation, as taking a book out of the shelf, making a box on a table, or putting it in a corner, or taking it out of a cover, a place with a cover. More interestingly is the experimental implementation of this, where you see that these robots are planning, use this model and taking it to the desired condition and position. Now, of course, on these executions, we rely on a well-perceived environment and a model that we are building. So the final point is the medium level of the pyramid that I was showing before, that must use reflexes to adjust the high-level plan to the reality. And here are some ways to do that. So the final piece of work that I want to mention is this reactive grasp control using tactile sensing by George Paul-Ail and Matthew Paul-Ail. When you have a plan for grasping an object that normally works, it will easily fail if the object is displaced even by a little while, as you can see here. The idea is that we can use tactile feedback. If a nominal grasping plan is given, then we can follow this plan until the contacts are established. And when the contacts are established, then we can correct the plan, trying to keep as close as possible to the original plan, but using this haptic feedback to involve more and more a more and more stable grasp. Here is the execution. So the whole idea is that when a contact is made, the hand stops moving that point and turns until, with the wrist and with the other fingers, until a second contact is reached. And when the second contact is reached, the 2 first contacts are kept constant, and the hand keeps moving in the direction that achieves the motion that is consistent with those 2 contact points and finds another contact point. This, in some sense, is the closest grasp compatible with the object to the original plan. Of course, this has been shown to work. This has been shown to work pretty well. We have no proof of convergence of this algorithm. We have some experimental evidence of a good behavior. So it is interesting, but of course, is not a solution to all problems that we have in grasp. So with this, I think I've finished my time. I thank you, and I'll be happy to get any questions you might have.
So thank you very much. Etienne, you are mute.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for this panorama. Is any question around? Anybody with a question? I don't see So I have a question. So of course you presented many things, so it's difficult to take a position. But okay, I have a specific question. So you, for example, in your soft hand, you have one synergy, and you may have two, but not that many. And now, so you speak about incorporating knowledge from observation of human behavior. So how do you do that with reduced number of degrees of freedom? I mean, so reduced synergies.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this is a good point for me in the sense that I might ask you, how many degrees of freedom do you think I would need to make it to learn from a human?
It depends.
It depends. So in many cases, I think one
I would be guided by the action.
As I was trying to show, I'm sorry, finish. Please go.
I would be guided by the actions that needs to be carried out.
Yeah. So if I needed to learn how to play piano, probably I would need many more. But if I need to make grasps in an environment, then my consideration is that you do not need 19 degrees of actuation, 19 independent motors. I think you need 19 joints, 19 degrees of freedom, a hand that can take the shape of the human hand, but you only need much fewer actuations, much fewer inputs. Because I believe that when we use our hands, we almost very rarely consciously think of the position of all our joints. And we control our hands in the environment so that they deform or they comply with the environment to take on the shape that we want to have. So the book example was exactly for that. You don't put your finger like this, you put the hand like this, and then you let the other fingers go. And there are many, many other examples where you can shape your hand exploiting the constraints in the environment. And many examples many work about synergies have shown that the dimensionality of our control of hands is much less than 19 or 23 if you want to include the palm. So, and in many, many cases, you are not using them independently. You are the degrees of freedom because the hand can take every configuration, but it can take that through the interaction with the environment, which in my opinion, I think is planned. So you are using the environment as more actuators than just the motors that you have in the hand.
Okay, thank you very much. I propose that we continue the discussion later because Domenico is waiting. Thank you so much, Antonio, and I look forward to discussing later. Thank you, Domenico, for coming. So Domenico Patriciso is in the University of Siena and also at IIT in Italy. And Domenico is known for haptics, innovation, and also